was able to participate. How great for you guys. Yeah.
We'll call the meeting to order, so we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is to advise those present at the meeting of the Board of Education, of the Pinelands Regional School District in the County of Ocean, that adequate notice of the meeting was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act. The notice has been posted in the Board of Education office, junior high school, and high school buildings. The notice was also mailed to the Press of Atlantic City and filed with the Municipal Clerks of Egg Harbor Township, Eagleswood Township, Little Egg Harbor Township, and the Borough of Tuckerton. Roll call, Mr. Brennan.
Mr. Bonnicky. Mrs. Chambers?
Here.
Ms. Hannadal?
Here.
Mr. Kavicki?
Here.
Mrs. McVeigh?
Here.
Ms. Palladino?
Here.
Mrs. Pakwakua?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
And Mrs. Ernst.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Could I please have a motion to approve the agenda with the understanding that under executive session, we will reverse A and B. Negotiations will come first, superintendent's search second. That way, those people who need to be excused can be excused and not have to stay.
Could we also get in executive session an update on the legal matter for FISA?
I don't know.
Just as far as status, nothing.
Yeah, I would say no, for the simple reason that we had the issue with the one bid because it wasn't part of the advertisement and had to be taken off. So the meeting was not listed. Superintendent search and negotiations was listed. So going on Amy's past practice, I would say no. I'm sorry.
When can we expect an update?
I would say probably at our work session, and Amy's not here, so, and she's not coming. Is that, I know that doesn't make you happy.
No, that makes the budget committee happy.
That Amy's not here, but not that that would be after
Yeah.
information was to be.
Oh, right. So I'm gonna make a shot in the dark and
Fine.
say,
No.
I can't. Okay, so is that okay with everybody?
Motion.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have an agenda.
Okay. Residents Forum. Would anybody like to speak?
Okay. I feel obligated. I mean,
Oh, you don't have to feel obligated, Jamie.
no, there's definitely some questions about the notification that went out today. Obviously, it's not everybody's here's job to do that, but the public clearly didn't know. Myself didn't. I didn't know until today. And I'm just curious of the process because, you know what I mean? Like, look around. But the fact that so many of us are so involved and we didn't know. And I know there was some discussion at the end of the last meeting where you guys were talking about tentative and stuff. And I searched the papers. I don't know when this stuff comes out. So if you could just explain like how the process works of how the public is notified so we know when to be expected. And if it, like how much notice there is. I don't think anybody really realizes that. And, that's basically it because it seemed there was a whole big thing. And,
Okay.
But
Okay.
anyway, I'll go sit so you can answer.
Oh, okay. I'll explain as much as I know.
Right.
As far as what goes on the webpage, no member of this board has access to that.
I figured that.
So we can't post anything.
Right.
So I know that for notification, legal notice in the paper has to be done, am I right, Steve, 48 hours in advance of the meeting? And I am, since I don't control that either, I'm gonna assume that yes, that was done. So I'm gonna let Cheryl or Steve, because the rest really becomes an administrative thing that really isn't done. So, I don't know,
I don't
Steve,
know what the issue is.
that it was not, the public didn't know because they can't find it in the newspaper.
Oh.
And the other part of it is, it wasn't on our webpage that we were having a meeting tonight. It did, I think, get posted this morning, correct?
The agenda did, I think,
Yes.
that's,
Okay, but was the fact that we were having a meeting posted on our webpage prior to this morning?
The answer would be no, because
Okay.
I called this morning when I noticed that it was not on there, immediately had it put on this morning. With regard to the advertisement, I'm seeing an email here from Steve that went out March 20th, but I know that that was sent sooner than them with the advertisement for the Atlantic City Press.
Okay,
So it did go out.
okay.
My apologies that it wasn't updated on the website. It just really, truly was an oversight.
Okay, well,
It
it's not
wasn't-
something
yeah.
that you really think about, but with the situation being what it is, it's
No, I
just the way it
understand.
worked out. So I just wanted an explanation. I'm sure everybody else is okay with that? I'm good. All right.
Sure they are.
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
I don't hear anything else. All right, thank you, Jamie. Is that it?
Yeah, it's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on then. Our discussion of the insurance claims history. Cheryl.
Very simple. This is just, what we planned on doing was, as long as it's concurrent with the rest of the board here, is that we plan on going for the claims history. That cost would be $2,000. Am I correct to do that? So everybody's in agreement? Or does anybody have any issues with us going forward with that? That would be for both workers of record, correct?
So we are just now making the request for this?
It's really just a standard operating procedure. It really doesn't even need to be approved by all of you.
Right, so I
So we-
thought it was.
I think it was a point of
acted upon.
clarification, so that's what I'm doing right now, to make sure that it is reflected in the minutes that that is what's going to be moving forward.
When can
And
we?
it's not too early still for the year?
Well, that's going to be an issue.
I thought we were gonna wait for that, that's all.
Early for, what do you mean the
You know,
year?
we need a year's history, we wanted to sort of get past the
Well, this
load.
is a negotiation item, right? We're set to kick off on negotiations. This is the main point.
I don't think it's a year of this year, a year of next year, any history.
Well, I think the point is that this has been sitting on the table for almost a year as it is. And it needs to be something that's taken off the plate, done, send out what we need so we can get the history and be done with it.
That's fine.
Was there any discussion on the cost of the $2,000 being picked up by the,
Companies?
not the company, but by the union requesting this additional?
That would have to be discussed in executive, I think.
All that we discuss in executive, but split the cost with negotiations and
Right, but I mean, whether they had offered that, does that have to go in
I think
to
that would be
executive?
part of
This
the
additional
negotiation
expense
strategy.
we're incurring.
Well, in a public meeting, I believe Mr. Reed had expressed whatever cost that it may incur, that they would be willing to either incur or split.
Okay.
I'm fairly sure that was in public.
I'm not sure.
Not sure about that, but,
That's why I brought it up to him again.
okay.
I mean, it's just prudent of us to consider that anyway. If we split it, then it's $1,000 less that comes out of the budget. It's a request that they've made to have this additional insurance broker receive the history. We wouldn't be doing it except for the fact that they requested it. So I think it's only fair. I think it's more than fair to split the cost with them.
And if they don't, is the board rescinding?
Well, I think the question becomes
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's certainly one for me to contact Mr. Reed and say, listen, here's the deal. Remember 50% of the cost is $7,500? Well, it's going to be less.
it's going to be a matter of whether they agree or not, so that Jeff would need to contact them, I would think.
All right, in the meantime, do you want an answer to that, Mrs. McVeigh, before we ask for that claims history?
Yeah, I think that what if in other negotiations, to stay generic with this, other requests come forward that are gonna cost the board money to complete, and we've set a precedent by paying for this when it was something that was specifically asked by them in negotiations. We would not be incurring this expense, except that they wanted this additional broker of record.
I think we have to remember too, that they first initiated this discussion and asked for this more than a year ago today. So a year ago back, they asked for shopping around. And we did do the data from New Jersey State Health Benefits because we do get one free. Okay, and that was done this time last year. I'm gonna say March, April. We didn't get all the information until I believe August, end of August, because the prescription was what was the holdup. So they did request this over a year ago, which would have been included if we had agreed to it in the free one. But since the board majority didn't want to do it at the time, now we're at the point where we are. If they agree to pay for half, that's great. But I don't feel that we should hold up and not go through with this just because they're not willing to pay half. I think at this point, we've put it out there that we're willing to shop around. We've approved this back in September with the broker of record, and it's been out here, just sitting here since then. So I'm not in agreement that we don't follow through if they don't decide to pay half. I don't know how everyone else feels.
I would say keep in mind that we pay, I was just gonna check, I think about $6 million in health insurance. Any savings to the PEA is savings to us. So $2,000 for potential savings, I think could be a good investment for both us and them. I would agree that this should not set precedent going forward, and that any other requests that they made, we shouldn't just consider it. I think this was one that the board did consider carefully. It's been over a year, as Pat had said, to get here, and that each decision along the way stands on its own.
So you were saying that, yes, you think we should just go out, request the claims history now?
I think if we can save money as a district, we should.
Okay.
And when it's a Steve, correct
There's
me if
no
I'm wrong,
guarantee of that.
$6 million expense item, it would be prudent to make sure we're getting the best deal for us and them.
There's no guarantee of that.
There is no guarantee of that. But it's, I think, when it's that big of an expense item, and Steve, can you find it quicker than I? Is that $6 million sound right? Reasonable?
Between 5 and 6 million, yes.
Right.
Mr. Kubricki, how do you kind of feel about it?
Yeah, I have no problem with going out for the claim history now
Okay.
and asking them to contribute half if they say no. And if they want to see it, then we charge them a fee to see it.
I don't think it works that way, Steve.
We have the
Nice
claim
if it
history, we
would.
pay for it, you want to see it, you have to pay $1,000 to look at it. So,
You are too funny.
So we get a free one every year,
2 years.
every 2 years. And when do we do another free one?
Yeah, I have to look at the date, but probably about this time next year, or after this time next year.
Mr. Williams?
I don't know why they can't use the last year one. We already have it. And, I mean, if that's what they'd be basing it on anyhow, and if, that's my view, because I know we approved this a long, long time ago to have it occur.
we might be in a better position though this year with the
Yeah.
claims history, so having an updated one could be to our advantage. It
Our
might not be,
Yeah,
but
there's
it could be.
no
you know.
guarantee.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
guarantee.
I think for a $6 million item, the prudent thing for us to do is to look at different areas to save. They want to go half on it, I think that would be fine, because we all benefit, they benefit and we benefit, so they should, kick into the percentage of it. If it's $2,000, I kick in $1,000.
He said he's not splitting the cost.
He just said that?
Yes. He has just moving water on it.
Are you using an electronic device?
I certainly am.
At least that's
Doing board business.
an answer that makes the debate mute.
And just a point of clarification, Steve, so even though we're going to a different company, it's not free the first year? I don't understand what the free is versus a year versus 2 years.
It's through the state health benefits. It's actually the benefit provider giving us the claims experience. So based on, I believe it's statute, we're provided one every 24 months. So because we're going out within 24 months again, they're gonna charge us $2,000.
So in other words, the claim history that does exist, they won't even give out to the other company. Is that what you're saying?
They'll provide it to us and then we provide it to them.
Yeah.
Generally, we say provide it to them directly, and I don't know if they ever do, but I always list them. I've listed them on the letter, so, but at the very least, we would get it and we can provide it to them.
So we request it. We
Right, we
initiate
have
the
to,
request.
yeah, we have to initiate the request.
Keep in mind too, it's gonna be months before we get it. Because we didn't get the last one until the end of August. It might even have been September when Gary was back here. I don't recall. I think
I'd
he was
have to
here in
look.
September or August meeting.
Well,
And
if
we
it-
had the final data.
And this has taken so long because of what exactly? It just didn't get done because of the whole Allen Associates controversy?
No, it did get done. Last year, we
But it
put
didn't
in.
go to Allen and Associates?
No, because the board majority did not want to go out and shop around. So it only went to Gary Goldfarb's Brown and Brown. That's all it went to.
And Jeff, do you think that it would, another year definitely gives another piece of information for everybody?
I'm the
Correct.
authority on that,
Who would be?
the insurance people.
What it's gonna give
My
you is a
opinion,
more
I would,
current readout on the claims. It doesn't mean that it's gonna be better or worse.
Right.
If there have been individuals who have used more insurance this year than last year, then it'll be worse. If there are individuals that have used less or have had smaller claims, it'll be smaller,
Well, it just means that they have more accurate data though.
more up to date.
It gives them a current snapshot of where we are at.
I know we've had a couple retirements, and those people were on medical leaves, which didn't do our history very good. They're now no longer on the position control roster because they're done. So I would think that they would drop off on that history as well.
All right, well, the bottom line here is this has been sitting on the table one way or another for a year. So I think it's time that we come to a decision as to what you wish to do. You know, we either use the current claim history, or obviously, they are not gonna pay half of the price for a new one. So I think what we need to do is we need to decide, what is it you wanna do?
All at once, individually?
Well, I mean,
Well,
it's gonna
answer
have to be
three
by
individually.
majority rule.
Three answered individually.
Already answered the question.
So you're saying go out, pay it
I think
to
we
the
could go out and
2,000,
do it.
one way or another.
I
Karen,
Here
tend
for
to
the
think the
chair.
history's gonna be better.
I'm fine,
I'm fine too.
you're fine with that.
absolutely.
Karen, you're fine with that. Stephen, Tommy, I'm fine with that.
I'm
Christie?
fine with that too.
Is this,
I think if this-
so the claims history, you get that, you're saying every 2 years for free? Every year you would have to pay whatever the price is. And this would decipher what the experience mod is for this upcoming year?
Previous year.
And it goes,
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but I think it's gonna
It's a-
determine
yes.
whether.
I'm an insurance.
Yes.
Yeah,
So what's the effective date for the policy? Do you know?
August 1st, I believe.
So the next
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
experience
that was
mod
our
will
old
come
one.
out yearly.
No, we're,
It would be January to
it'll be
January.
January to December.
So this January, a new experience mod came out, which would just affect
We're
this
in the
upcoming
state
year.
plan.
So this experience mod can be lower.
Mhm.
Could be.
So we are currently in the state
Right.
plan. So
Okay.
right now, our experience has been poor, so we are in the state plan.
Okay, so we're trying
It
to
could be
get
a
out.
matter of trying, if our experience has improved, we can come out of the
Okay.
state plan.
And if
and get a better
January is a
rate and
new
save
one,
money.
is a new term, so we're gonna have a new experience mod. So it would
Yes.
make sense to see what it is. So I
That's
said
the
pay the
part
$2,000.
I'm not sure about. I don't know if they'll just go back. Because it's a 2-year look back, from what I'm told, so I don't know if they'll go back as far as they can.
I'm in a commercial side of insurance, and I know yearly we have updated experience mods. I don't know how it works on this end, but I would assume it's,
But we haven't been in state health benefits for 2 years yet.
Okay,
So that, I don't know how far back they'll go, I'm assuming to when they
they go
jumped
back,
in.
yeah, okay.
But I just request give us the most recent 24 months or as much as you can history, that's what, something like that, how the letter reads. So kind of give us the most that you can.
Right.
Okay, so the board, basically, the majority is saying, we're willing to pay the money to get a new claims history, correct?
That
Okay.
seems odd, but yes.
Okay, so how quickly can this go out, the request, Steve?
We'll put a letter out with the purchase order tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll have to cut a check, I'm permitted to cut checks in between bills lists by policy. If no one has a problem with that, I can just move it along tomorrow.
There's nothing, I'm gonna ask, there's nothing illegal about that, right? I mean, if he cuts a check? I mean, we've all agreed
For policy
Okay.
permit, and we'll just put it on
Has to be a certain amount.
on for the approval at our next meeting.
April.
Okay.
In board policy, I'm permitted to
Okay,
issue checks in between.
alrighty, let's move on. Tentative budget. Certainly my bailiwick.
Yeah, so the budget committee met with Cheryl and Steve last Monday. We had another meeting, we went in, just a reminder, the budget committee is myself, Mr. Kubricki, Mrs. McVeigh, and Tommy, Mr. Williams, sorry.
Tommy's
Was
fine. I
not
was sick.
available last week, he was ill. So, we did met, we presented, I had a number, the meeting prior, we had been provided a draft, budget, which the draft presentation to us included a 2% tax levy and excess spending, so more expenses than what even the 2% tax levy would cover by, I wanna say 100 and, something else, 40,000. From that draft, the committee had a number of questions and also suggested items for the admin team to go back and take a second look at. They did, and they came back to our meeting last Monday, prepared with questions to our responses, as well as some good dialogue on the list of items that we had suggested they take a closer look at. All in all, I guess the highlights are, the current budget includes a lease purchase of $300,000. It includes a tax levy increase of 1%, and this is overall, so each of our sending districts may look a little bit different, but for the overall district, it's a 1% tax levy increase. It balances the budget, and it has some room. There were, I'll say, some other areas where we could have maybe tightened it up a little bit, and there was some good dialogue on that. But essentially, we have a lot of unknowns going into next year. And the thought was, to have some room for some of the unknowns that we may encounter would be a responsible thing to do. I'm trying to think of some of the other big ticket items, but Ian, you're looking at me, does any come to mind that would be worth mentioning? It factors in the current PEA negotiated increase that we had negotiated with them for the current year, as well as a 2% for the upcoming year, which that is under negotiations.
I think the important thing is that we didn't cut anything, we didn't cut field trips, well,
Yeah,
we didn't eliminate them.
Yeah. no cut to staffing, no cut to programs. We did ask them to take a hard look at some of the supplies and materials. There's a lot in the budget for all the different areas, which they did, and cut back on some of that. But yeah, that's a good point. No change in personnel, no cuts to personnel, no cuts to our programs.
And you wanna take a look at some of the extracurriculars and see if they're actually meeting the needs, some of them.
Right, and if there's good student participation. So just like we made a commitment for our sports teams, where if there's not participation, we would run, like the freshmen or the some of the programs. Look at, when you look at the stipend list for clubs, it's probably a page and a half for all the different clubs we run. The thought was really to make sure that there's student participation in all of these. So what we agreed to do was to leave them all intact, But before we make appointments to the officers for next year, we should look at and make sure that we're having student participation in them. And maybe it's a matter of we don't run, and I'm just throwing this out, you know, the junior high school newspaper, because there's not enough student participation. We could choose not to run that and not appoint someone there. Or maybe there's another need that we have where the kids have another interest that we should use that money to fund something else. But we just made a commitment to look at that.
Do we currently have, and I guess it would depend on, you know, the extracurricular activity, but is there a minimum or a maximum, like a minimum, like, well, you know, if there aren't 5 kids in an entire school
We said 10.
that are interested in this, there could be an issue.
We set the numbers of, what was it before, it was set before at like 10. And that was for classes and everything, and
Right.
some of that doesn't occur today.
Well, I know we run academic classes, AP classes sometimes with
Right.
less, but, you know, clubs are,
I thought there had to be 10. I don't know what policy states. I'll be
do
honest
you
with you.
know, Cheryl, what our usual procedure protocol is for that?
In terms of the number
And
of
numbers of students involved in an extracurricular activity?
I didn't really know that there was any cap on that.
Okay.
I mean, there can be, I mean, it's not an issue. I mean, obviously,
Right.
if something's not, it's not drawing the interest, you know, then obviously, you know, we need to examine it.
Well, I remember when we looked at this before, and sometimes, you know, it would come out, well, you know, it could be 10, and the next week it's 2, and then maybe it's 3, and then it goes back to 2, and then the next week it might be 10. So I'm just,
I think policy addresses your academic areas.
okay.
I mean, last year, we looked at athletics, and there was a blurb on the approvals put in.
Yeah.
That it was pending student
Right.
participation in some of the athletic
Right.
teams. So if there wasn't enough sign up, then the program didn't run.
I thought we did that with the clubs too.
I just don't know if there was a
I don't know if we
minimum
have a
number.
I know we
in there
talked
or not.
about 10. I don't know if that's been,
Was there, do you recall?
if that's in our
I
policy.
think the building principal could answer that question, because I think we discussed eliminating due to lack of participation, and he set a number.
I thought we did
I
too.
believe that is in policy.
And I think it's the vice principals at each building that are in charge of making sure we get the attendance
Mhm.
sheets and such for that.
Attendance
So we,
sheets and
the thought, the discussion was that there should be some information available
Right,
to show which
right.
clubs are meeting regularly and which clubs do have active participation.
Well, we did get that last year, I do remember
Yeah.
that.
And that
Um,
before we appoint for next school year, especially given that everybody's gonna be in one building, you know, do we need to,
Right,
you know, whether it's sand clubs or
right.
whatever.
And the other thing too was the 6-period stipends we took a look at.
Were
We asked
reduced.
Cheryl to take a look at that and see if
Yeah.
we actually needed that. It's all of it, not
Yeah,
some
I
of
mean,
it.
that's a dangerous area, because again, we don't know, you know, exactly what the schedule's gonna look like for next year in this building, so it's dangerous to mess with the 6-period stipends. Because essentially what could happen is if, I don't know, we have enough students involved in something, really a 6-period stipend could be a position. So it could be a program. So just remember that if we can't pay for a 6-period stipend, it may mean elimination of something. So it's a very dicey area, because if you eliminate staff, and we wanna have all the offerings that we do with the elective programs or whatnot, then we need to make sure, you know, that we have the staff to be able to support those.
We haven't
You mean if
eliminated
we
these.
eliminate staff regarding a 6-period stipend?
Exactly. So consider a 6-period stipend is like, you know, if you add elective programs and you have a number of students who want to participate in an elective program, it would require a teacher to offer another section, which would require a 6-period stipend. So if you are minimizing those number of stipends, then you're not going to be able to have some of those programs offered, you know, to the fullest extent.
Right,
But I remember-
what we did commit to
Not for
was when
electives.
we're building the schedule to keep that in mind with the goal to minimize.
Right, but I think the issue last year, when we looked at this, was really, and I don't know how it would be affected this year, being in one building, is that you might have, I'm just gonna make an example, Algebra 1 running, you know, period 2, and it could have up to 9 mainstreamed kids, but there are only 3 in there. And then there's an Algebra 1 over here running the same period, and there's 2 kids mainstreamed in there, and then later on in the day, there's another Algebra 1 running, and there's 4 kids in there. I think the discussion last year surrounded trying to schedule in such a way that maybe you don't go to the max, I think, which is 9, but you attempt to combine so that we're not.
And I think that was done because your numbers are down for your 6th period versus the past.
Versus the past. I don't know, I don't have anything to compare it to. So, okay.
You know, in a schedule change, again, you take away the rotational block, which, you know, we won't run obviously next year, which, you know, that could
Ease it up a little.
precipitate, yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, you know, we can try to control that, and then I think everybody knows that on the administrative team, that we try to prevent that from happening as much as possible.
Right, okay.
As difficult as some of it is with the scheduling, that has to be looked at through scheduling,
Right.
first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't disagree with you, but just it's gonna be, there's a lot of, just as Karen said, there's a lot of unknowns in next school year, and, you know, we're taking some risks here,
Right.
and within the budget itself because of those unknowns.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of good compromise, and I think Dr. Stevenson is right. We're taking some risk here with the dropping down from the 2% tax levy to the 1%, but at the same time, we're allowing for flexibility for these unknowns and not being too restrictive. And I think that particularly our budget chairman did a fabulous job in terms of trying to get a meeting of the minds between, you know, everyone involved with respect to those things, trying to whittle off the things which weren't going to affect the instructional outcome, and try and reduce the tax levy and still allow for flexibility. So I think really the board owes Karen a really round of applause for how she handled the situation, because I don't
Thank
think
you.
I would have handled it.
Thank you to
that
the whole
well.
committee, really.
Yeah, I
Thank
was
you.
gonna say all of us, it was all of our thoughts together. I would just add that we would like to request a policy 4322 to be revisited. That's our cell phone reimbursement. Our costs have doubled in recent years for that, and we just thought we understand that is consistent with our policy, and we thought we should take a look at what that says and come to agreement.
Is it
Because
the-
that's increasing a total amount in the budget that seems to be more than just essential services.
Okay, so there's an increase in cost. Is it because there are a number of people that fall under that?
Apparently.
We don't know how that's decided.
Okay, so 4322?
4322 is
Okay.
what I
The policy lists the people who are entitled to.
The policy does, or the
The policy has
procedure?
the positions in there.
Not the procedure.
I don't know, I'd have to take a look at it.
Yeah.
But it
Just look at it.
I'll look at it in a minute, but I have the class size one up here, 2312, and it only affects course of study, all right? 10, and it says 10. There's no determination as
But it
far as.
also clubs and activities.
Well, you might want to then have the policy committee look at the extracurricular activities and put some, you know, I mean, I would ask the admin team. I mean, they know
They give input
more
on it.
than, more than anybody.
Well, we have some clubs that are volunteer,
Oh.
who may
Right.
have greater attendance than some of the clubs that are getting a stipend, so.
And I think we have to be careful too, because some of the clubs, like your math competition club, they only run, I think, with very few students to begin with. So that would be,
I do know, and Jeff probably remembers, I think we were on negotiations the last time around. We spent a lot of time looking at the stipends, not only for the clubs, but for the athletics. On the athletic side, we focused on to make sure that our stipends for our coaching positions were comparable with what we saw in some surrounding areas in our peer districts. For clubs, we didn't necessarily have that to go off to benchmark it, but what we did get from and again, I think it was the building vice principals, a lot of information about the different clubs, how often they meet. Some meet weekly, some meet monthly, some meet quarterly. Student participation and really time commitment for each of the clubs with regard to expectations. And we actually revisited the categorization, the bucketing of how much is this club, how much does their advisor get paid versus this other club. And at that point, we did move some volunteer positions up into the lowest paid. And I think there were some volunteer positions created, volunteer clubs created. So it was based on participation numbers or the first time through. They have to kind of, they want a teacher, a staff member wants to start a club. I'm thinking of like the fishing club. We have in the Challenger League, the Buddy Club. If it's a suggestion from a staff member to start a club, we have them do it as a volunteer basis to begin to prove the student involvement and then evaluate it from there. So I know we spent a lot of time last time, I don't know if you'd like to add to that, but I mean, I think it would be worth seeing the student participation numbers and if we want to run some of these clubs or
I
not.
think in the
I want
policy
space
committee,
would
we
even be
also
limited.
got a copy of that, if I remember correctly. All the clubs,
Oh, yeah, we did.
And
That
the
was back when
numbers.
Dr. Blake was here, though.
Right,
I
it's probably
think
5
it
years
was,
ago
yeah.
now.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. I also think space might be a consideration for next year. Do we have room to run
Right.
all of the clubs?
Right.
No.
right?
4322 cell phone reimbursement, there's 12 designated personnel that are on here. Directors, attendants, superintendent BA, school principals, athletic director, information systems department personnel, so I guess that would cover a few more people. That would be your tech department? Okay. Buildings and ground supervisor, transportation director, attendance director, school-based youth service coordinator, assistant principals, director of student services, and director of special education. So out of the 12 here, the one systems departmental personnel would, I would think, accommodate a group of people. So I don't know.
System principals, there's 4. Yeah, so you're looking at,
It's a lot of people, yeah. Okay. Anything else on the budget?
Karen, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
So the park readiness aid, I get that, that's probably going away, right? But what about the pupil growth aid and the professional learning community aid? Are they just things the state is not paying for us to have? I'm not sure how those things work.
So Steve, I'm sure can address that question. So what we generally characterize as state aid, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, is anything from the, I think it's the categorical special education aid down. That's kind of what the state aid that we get. I don't know if it's just terminology, what they used to call it last year versus it's lumped in with something else this year. Because in total, essentially our state aid, you can see that adjustment aid looks like it's decreasing 234,000 and change, almost 235,000. That is actually before that second cut that we got last summer for the 227,000 from the state. So actually, Steve, I thought that was going to be adjusted in the first column to show no change, because that says budget through 131, which would be the lower amount in there.
Our working document actually had the original numbers. It's the opposite, so I put in the actual numbers of what we're receiving this year, so the 784.
Is too high.
Yeah.
So it's showing a decrease. That 784 should come lower, so it would show more flat.
I'll double check that one to make sure I have the actual number in there. I thought I changed it, but you're right, it does look a little bit high.
Right, so essentially, I think our state aid has gone up a little bit this year.
40,000.
Yeah. So
39.
look,
inches.
right. So,
Okay,
but
and
can
then-
you ask him specific questions on those other categories?
I don't have an answer to that.
Oh, all right, no problem.
It's
I just wondered if it
something
had to
that-
do with park readiness and that's why it was disappearing, basically. And the transfer to charter schools, we don't know the answer to that one either.
The transfer to charter schools is really just an out-of-district tuition placement, which is not a
Well,
special
those didn't go
education.
down, did they?
It all depends on the placements. And if they,
That's why it's confusing.
yeah, so it's
Okay.
actually part of the state aid notice that we have. So the charter schools submit their enrollment, and then we get, at a point in time, budget time, obviously, an assessment for charter schools. It's really tuition, but for some reason they have us put it in a different account.
Just
I
needs to
guess-
make us correct. I don't know how you keep that straight. All right, so basic skills and bilingual then, those are the other things I was confused about. Because I know we went down to bilingual last time, so we're going down again, and then basic skills is 100% out. So is it just a moving around again?
basic skills, we had 2 items in there for basic skills as being paid for out of the local funds. but you receive Title I funds. So Title I funds,
Federal.
right, so
Okay.
instead of duplicating the services, we're using our Title I funds to support all the supplies in Title I programs. So that's that expense you're seeing cut there. So it's not
Okay.
going away, it's
It's
just
just-
it's being redistributed in the federal funds,
Okay.
where it belongs.
Under Title I.
Okay.
Yeah.
And same thing for the bilingual?
Yeah, same thing for bilingual,
Okay.
because we have immigrant
Okay.
Title III funds that are available to us.
Title III,
Mhm.
okay. Thank you.
Any other
And then
questions?
just a reminder for everyone, on the third page, you see the state, the grants and the federal grants, state and federal grants, they're budgeted at 85%, which you can see, it looks like there's a 15% decrease, so they're budgeted, required to be budgeted at 85% of it, but in actuality, we expect to get the full 100%. Correct, Steve?
Right.
Yeah.
If we don't get the grant for it, theoretically, we don't have the expense.
Right. So although it looks like a decrease, I don't know if that would catch your eye.
So again,
It's just a
we didn't
budget.
get cut the 227,000 that we got cut last summer, plus we got another 3940.
Correct.
Okay.
They restored it and gave us a 39.
All right, thank you.
This is complicated though, the budget, I thought I was relatively on top of things, but I'm obviously not. But it's complicated, I mean, we were going through the meetings again, our effort was basically identifying areas that we could cut that wouldn't affect instruction and trying to make recommendations that would serve us this year.
So for the public that is here or listening, the 1% tax levy is on the general fund. That is not to say when you get your tax bill, you will only see 1% increase, unfortunately, for Pinelands School District, because we do have the debt service increasing, which we all know that kicks in for this upcoming tax bill, I guess in August, for the referendum.
And the total tax levy, the 1% might somewhat be offset by township increase in ratables. So while the tax levy is going up, the ratables might go up, so it might not even be that 1%.
And we also did, if I recall, got a better interest rate on the bond than what was reflected in those online calculators, so that impact should be a little bit less than what we were showing online as well,
Do we know at
so.
this,
Trying.
do we
Thank
know
you,
at this
Karen.
point in time, with the high school shutting down and then all the buildings over there, are we running the Rainbow Express program next year?
We will be running a Rainbow Express program, we just haven't determined where and what facility out of it's going to be run,
Oh,
okay?
we will run it.
Yes.
So that's part of curriculum, right? What we did take out of the budget was money for a new playground.
Playground.
8,000?
Yep, so that will be contemplated for next year, once we get settled back over to the high school and looking to redo those facilities for that.
Karen, if you don't mind, I would like to make a point of reference on two pretty important items. One of them is, obviously, security and safety of schools has become, quite an issue. And the State Department will be coming down with some additional protocols as they re-establish what we're to be doing in the state of New Jersey. We did include in the budget an armed security guard that would be paid for by the school district. However, since everybody's going to be in this building, we can maintain our 2 police resource officers, but please note that in the following school budget, there should be very serious consideration as to an armed security guard that's paid for and hired here as an employee from Pinelands. And, there may be some indication from the State Department making those kinds of recommendations, so just be wary that although, I feel very strongly about that position, but I do understand, the limitations from the budget. In addition, the cuts to the budget do put on hold our initiative for a 1-to-1 that we started several years ago. So this year would have been pretty critical in making sure that all of our students were getting closer to a 1-to-1 initiative in the school district. So that is going to be put on hold. So our Google Chromebooks that we normally, buy additional ones each year, we will place on hold for future years.
Do we have a
think
total
within the lease
number of those?
purchase, it's a matter of, we talked about prioritizing. So I'd like to see where we end up with our lease purchase.
The original request was for a lease purchase agreement of $600,000, which included the Chromebooks and everything else. We knocked it down to $300,000 and left it at the discretion of the administration to prioritize and see what they wanted to get for $300,000, which could include the Chromebooks or could include something else, whatever they see as the priority. in
I thought the budget
administration.
included up to 600, but we only spent like 490.
That would, no,
That
the
was-
year
Last
before.
year, it was a
That was 500.
Last year, we
Right.
spent, so it's up to 500, that's how much we're funding from the budget, not what we can buy with it. So think of it, we pay interest on that money, so we're not getting, in this case, $300,000 worth of stuff. We have to buy stuff plus interest for $300,000. So last year, I think is what you might be thinking of. Last year, it was a $500,000.
That's what I'm saying.
This year in the
490 I thought
draft
it was, but
budget
okay.
was 600,000. We did get it was a lengthy list of requests and, the committee decided, felt 300,000 was more reasonable. And just encouraged, to prioritize.
Did we ever get a number of where we were at with the Chromebooks?
Total number of Chromebooks, I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh.
But we're not at a one-to-one. And and remember, a lot of those Chromebooks that were purchased from Title I funds.
Mhm.
So with the Title I funds, those students who are Title I students, they're the only ones that have access to those.
Mhm.
So even though our number may look as if we have this, it really doesn't reflect a one-to-one because of the Title I students do have a one-to-one initiative because we support it through the grant.
Yeah. But I know during our budget conversations, we had asked, what our numbers were.
I thought a one-to-one was a pretty big goal for us overall, no? I think I know it is for the elementary schools too. How much, was there a way to do it? Was the 300,000 gonna make that much difference to the bottom line? Was that why you?
300,000, nothing's been decided on what's being purchased with the 300,000.
You
Kim.
can get
If
$300,000
it is
in Chromebooks
If
you
it is
want.
something that is a priority, then they ought to prioritize where the money's spent.
And we also indicated that it might be advantageous for the district to establish on their website, a wish list where they could list items and publics could donate those items. And certainly having Chromebooks on that wish list might solicit people to donate those Chromebooks and therefore meet some of the needs. Whether that's implemented at some later time, I think the board will have to discuss the notion of a wish list, in terms of having that available. This is what we couldn't fund this year, but this would be nice to have. Let's list all this stuff. A resident can go on and say, oh, I think I'll donate this and this and this to the high school.
Dr. Stevenson did bring up a good point about the school security officer. We did have discussion about that. I think the budget committee does support that. I think if I'm misspeaking, please speak up. The thought really was just with operating under one building, having the 2 school police officers should be sufficient to have 2 police officers in one building, but we definitely support, once the high school opens up, we should take a serious
Look at
I
that.
think there's gonna be
For
new
that.
mandates. I think it's gonna be taken out of our hands. There's
So if the
gonna be
high school's
mandates.
closed all year, it's a topic
For
for
what's
the next
required.
budget meeting. Should things move along and it opens early, I think maybe, we'll see. Before then.
One thing not mentioned that affects the board was, and that we cut, was our request for legal services. 2 years ago, it was about 60,000. This past year, it's been 145,000, and we put in the budget 75,000 for legal services with the intent to cut back on that. The legal services for the referendum are paid for by the referendum budget, so that's not in the 145,000 we've expended so far on legal services. So that was an area we could cut and be more judicious in how we utilize those services.
I think that also has to come not only from board,
Yeah.
but I think that also has to come from within the building, regarding where are our legal issues and how do we control those
Mhm.
legal
Yeah.
issues that are occurring, within the school.
Was there a
So,
breakdown of what makes up those dollars?
We did not see that.
No,
The
that
other
would have to
thing-
probably be a
Compared to
Bill's
other
list,
years.
so we can.
The other thing,
figure that total.
We know prior years were running around, I think it was 60,000, so we did put in the budget 75, which is a little bit of an increase over prior years. And we said we should bring it as a, to the board, so thank you for doing so. And really, we don't have our attorney here today. I know we talked about, was it last month or the month before, did not have that workshop. So,
Well,
just be a
yeah.
little more careful with how we're using that resource.
Right, and I agree, hopefully with the, you know, the new construction company, et cetera, some of that can be taken care of. We definitely, though, all of the legal expenses regarding the construction have definitely been placed under referendum funds,
That's what we were told.
yeah?
When they bill it, they separate it out under
Okay,
construction,
all
so
right.
if they have it separated under construction, then we would charge it to that. If it's,
Okay,
mixed in with the other stuff, it's a little difficult to tell based on the description that
Okay.
they give us, so I'd
Okay.
separate out as much as the detail as they provide us.
okay.
And this past number of 145
145.
included, the referendum
No, it
numbers?
did not.
It did not, so we're talking,
It did not, correct?
No, I don't believe it's in there, I'll double
So
check
that
to
would
make
have
sure.
been
but
how,
I'm
if you
pretty sure I
think of
looked it over.
the past year, we had a number of grievances, we've had a number of litigations, we've had a number of legal things the board has
Due
had
process.
to dealt with.
well,
I thought we had
I would
less things from the actual school, didn't we? Didn't we have less this past year?
We've had more,
Grievances? We've had less grievances.
well, most grievances, I don't really know if they've reached legal level, but I know that there's been litigants caused legal
well,
bills.
short of us speculating what's on those legal charges, as we all look at data and want to compare data and talk about data, math is math. Math tells a story. If we are looking to curtail certain, or the reasons why we've incurred higher legal fees, it's going to be in that analysis. Correct?
So I think.
So we review that data, or I don't want to review the data, but someone should review the data to,
Well, the committee
compare.
threw out a recommendation for 75,000 and asked if the admin team, based on what they know, was comfortable with it. I think we were all comfortable with the 75,000 number. I'm misspeaking, please, someone,
well, no,
speak up.
I'm okay with the 75,000 too, but so we don't go to another $140,000, an extra 70,000, what made those fees increase, spike this year, so we can avoid doing that next year and the years to
So I think
follow.
we have to keep a more close eye on the month-to-month
Right.
legal bills and make sure if it seems like it's approaching something, if you have 75,000 for 12 months, that's about a $6,000, $6,250 a month for legal fees. If we keep a month-by-month basis on that, we could curtail it or cut it back as the need arises to meet
Right.
that budget.
There's some things we'll be able to cut back, there's some things that
We
we
won't.
won't. I believe that also includes our deductible, right? So we had some cases where we had to pay our deductible.
Yep, a couple cases where we
So
had to
that
pay a
alone
deductible.
is $10,000, so.
But I think Jeff
So
is
there's
right
some
in
things
terms
that we
of
can control.
looking at what the data
Yeah.
says. Are there areas of the
Yeah.
school which are causing us to spend money on legal issues
Yeah.
where better management, better administration would prevent those legal costs?
Well, I think we can also, I mean, certainly we can talk about this moving forward, but I think we can also attempt to, anything that has something to do with a legal issue, well, then it would have to be done on our regular Wednesday meeting, because we've had many, many legal issues come up for our Monday meetings, which therefore requires our attorney to be here. So that would be something that the board would have to decide, which
What-
would obviously cut down the fee.
One more question on the lease, just if you, is it only technical stuff on the lease, or is there other things?
There are other things.
Like, just as a, for instance, so like,
pickup truck.
oh, some cars.
Whiteboard.
Whiteboards,
some
playground
physical
equipment,
things too.
Lockers,
dishwasher.
Lockers?
lockers for the junior high school, basketball uniforms every 4 years, not basketball, sports uniforms every 4 years. So those were all things on the, as lease purchase item.
Okay, thanks.
I think the other thing that's important for us to point out too is that our estimate, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, the estimate fees for moving the seventh graders over to the Frog Pond School are absorbed into this budget and not going to be charged to the referendum. I think it's important for all of us to know.
The cost of moving the students, I don't know if we decided on our final.
I said the estimate.
Yeah.
The estimate. I mean,
Yeah,
if we do it,
Yep.
the cost will be in the budget and not charged to the referendum.
Right.
Yes.
I
It's
thought that we
important for
wanted
everybody
to
to know.
preserve that referendum money for referendum projects, but that we could, because we already have the travelers
Right,
coming out of it.
right.
Okay, good point. Anything else?
Anything
that
else?
I missed, anyone?
Okay, so Steve, you wanna
So,
read
I just
the,
would like to thank Steve and Cheryl for their patience in asking our, and addressing our questions, so thank you for the team effort.
And again, one final point, this is a tentative budget, so I'm sure the board will be receptive to comments of the public before we approve a final budget. If they, respond to this tentative budget, we're certainly open to their ideas and suggestions and how we can deliver a good educational program at the same time cost-effective and prudent fiscal management. So,
okay. So Steve, you need to vote on the first.
Yep, so we'll need a motion and a second for the 2019 tentative budget.
Just I have a question on the resolution, April 30th, is that the correct date?
Right, we are meeting, I'll double check just to confirm. We pushed it around because if we followed our normal procedure, our regular meeting to approve it would occur after the deadline. So let me just double check, and I want to look at the calendar to make sure that's.
So we'll have 3 meetings in April?
The 30th is a workshop meeting, correct?
The 30th is really the main workshop.
Okay,
Oh, good.
gotcha.
okay.
Let me just take a double check just to be sure, because we can change that. Make sure I check that.
Because on our calendar, you had May 9th as the budget hearing. Does it have to go to the county on the 21st?
Yeah, we have that's our regular session. The way we normally handle it, we do the public hearing at the workshop portion. And then once the hearing's done, no changes can be made, and then we make the formal resolution at the May 9th meeting. So.
May
that's
9th is our regular
Regular meeting.
May 9th is regular meeting, April 30th is the May,
workshop.
right.
Okay.
So, I'm sure you'll take care of the advertising, or just the calendar's
Yeah,
off
what-
that. It says May 4th, and it backs up from there, so.
Where does it say May 4th?
On the back. The last line on the first page, it depends on, I'm sure you'll take care of that.
I just don't know what you're referring to. What do you-
Your budget calendar,
Budget
advertising
calendar.
proposed budget.
Oh, that's the budget calendar for the, no,
So,
we've already our annual advertisement
okay, covers it?
is already, it's been legally advertised as the 9th, but what we'll do is, I'll explain how this works. So what you're really approving is the submittal of the tentative budget to the Department of Education.
Tonight.
Right, and then when we get that back from the Department of Education, somewhere around, hopefully before the 30th, we may have to move that to the 9th. We'll, in the budget, we have to advertise in the paper as well. In that advertisement, it'll have the budget hearing date as well. So we almost advertise it twice. We do it our annual meeting notice and when we advertise the full budget. But we don't do that until we get approval, and there's certain, I forget the threshold, but there's a certain number of days that we have to do it in advance of the public hearing, which is longer than your normal 48-hour notice.
Okay.
Okay, we all set? So we need a motion and a second for the tentative budget?
Motion?
Second?
Okay, is there any other discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bonnicky?
Yes.
Mrs. Chambers?
Yes.
Ms. Hannadel?
Yes, but I would love, us to think about the lease purchase in a bigger way. I know that, you know, it's not just for technology, but I think that it then puts the pressure on, technology as not, as being the thing that gets kicked out. And it's the one thing that, you know, everything's going to technology. This is where we're going. So it's still a little frustrating, but I think you did a great job. I know how hard this is, so I appreciate all your work. I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Mr. Kubricki?
Yes?
Mrs. McVeigh?
Yes.
Ms. Palladino?
Yes.
Mrs. Paklakua?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mrs. Ernst?
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries.
Residents Forum? No? Okay, I'm moving right through that then. Board Forum then, before we go into executive session. Mr. Williams?
Thank everyone for coming out.
Don't breathe on anybody, Mr. Williams. Mr. Kubricki?
Yeah, I think it's a good time now to address Kim's concern because of the budget committee. I think there were, and that's why I commend Karen for how she handled it, because there were members of the budget committee, non-naming names, but including me, who are not particularly fond of the idea of lease purchase.
Me
And we
too.
would have preferred to see nothing for lease purchase and things that needed to be bought in the regular budget. And at the same time, there was a realization by other members of the committee that, you know, we couldn't just go cold turkey without lease purchase. We have 5 years of lease purchase agreement, so this is the 5th year rollover. So we still have 4 other years, which are binding subsequent boards to expenditures for those lease purchases, which isn't quite maybe what you should be doing as a Board of Education, binding other boards to your spending of money for new members who are coming on. So there was divergent views on the whole notion of lease purchase. And I think as next year's budget comes up, it would be a good time to have a further discussion on just the idea of lease purchase and how it fits into the overall buying of equipment and financing how we buy those equipment.
Can I answer?
Yeah,
Are you support for
again,
me?
it really,
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and I think lease purchases just tend to be, especially with things like technology, where they replace it in a much faster version. I mean, you're paying for leases, yes, it's like most people lease their cars because you change it over. You get the new stuff in 3 years, and you don't have to deal with the, you know, the old stuff. So the thing is, maybe there's some things that are in a lease, in the lease purchase that we can look at that should not be bought in a lease purchase, and that's a totally valid point. So I appreciate it.
So I think just point of clarification, a lease purchase is we are actually buying it.
Yeah, we're
But I
not,
thought there's always a
Turning it
changeover.
in, we
no.
buy it for 5 years. It's equipment that generally has a 5-year lifespan,
Okay,
and that's.
and then
the
it just gets
requirement.
thrown out, or?
We don't
We
know.
decide what to do with it. Does it need to be replaced or not? But it's not like we're leasing it. It's just the terminology. So we're actually buying it and paying it over 5 years.
So
And
that's
then
a
Steve,
credit
if you
card.
want to add to that. Would you, is
Well,
that a
that's
fair
different.
characterization?
So it's not like something you
Right.
turn it over and you're getting like the new model and.
Yeah, you can, but you're buying the new model.
Yeah, I mean,
Buy a
no,
new
I,
lease purchase.
so I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I mean, it's something that sometimes it's not the best
Right,
option
exactly.
financially.
Okay, Mrs. Paklakua.
So I would just like to thank my budget committee for their efforts and their dedication and us all going through this. And I would like to thank all of you for having this meeting tonight because we weren't ready for that board meeting. So thank you for allowing us the extra time to go through this. I think we did end up in a good compromise position.
Mr. Bonnicky?
Some insight on high school graduation for this year. The discussion of location. I guess that's from Dr. Stevens.
It is? Yeah, we are researching the use of other facilities and the cost of that as we speak. We've gotten back some numbers from, don't quote me because I don't want to be
Never
wrong, Stockton and, Atlantic City Convention Center.
Is there a reason why we would be looking elsewhere? Can we have a board discussion on this at some point?
We're gonna need to.
Yeah, well, I think that the students generated a lot of the concerns. So the student council came to our building principal, who then chose to take a look into it. So I think it was a student-generated concern, and, rightfully so. It's their graduation, and I think we owe them, at least the responsibility of taking a look into some other options that are available to them.
The auditorium is not.
The auditorium is, but there was some concern because they weren't gonna be able to have, an outside graduation on the football facility because of the construction there, or the work that's gonna be done on there.
Right.
It closes that facility. Okay,
Okay.
so there's been other explorations, and I think Mr. Bannon needs to speak on that behalf because of some of the other options available to us. But they come at a cost, and again, it does cost us money to run a graduation. But there's a lot of concern from the community and the public if you have it in the auditorium, that it limits, the number of people that can come into the auditorium to see it, and then you would have the satellite positions of it being, live casted in another areas. So those are the student concerns.
Perhaps we can invite Mr. Bannon for an update and maybe a
Absolutely.
question or two from us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Q&A.
Mrs. Chambers.
I'd like to thank the Budget Committee for all your hard work and the time that you've put into this. You're better than me. I'd also like to thank Dr. Stevenson and Mr. Brennan with their help with this as well, and the administration and their feedback. Our ed policy meeting was canceled because of the snow day back on this 22nd. So I did reach out to the policy committee and Dr. Stevenson, and we'll reschedule at our workshop, come up with a mutually agreeable time. In the meantime, the board manual is out there on a limb. It does need some final revisions. So in speaking to actually Mr. Kabricki, he has offered, since it was his original PDF file, to take a look at some of the final revisions that need to be made. I sent him a list of what we had generated from the last meeting. It was just a matter of getting access to the document through the Business Administration Office. So we really hope to have something for you for the workshop meeting to take a look at and get your feedback, any changes, or if it's a go. So that's our goal at this point, all right? So Ed and Policy Committee, take a look at your calendars. At our workshop meeting, we'll discuss when we're going to meet in April for the rest of that agenda. Okay? Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. All three of you.
Yes. Ms. Palladino.
Thank you. Good night.
Mrs. McVeigh.
I'd also like to thank the Budget Committee. There was hours upon hours of work dedicated to that, and to Dr. Stevenson and Mr. Brennan, because at the last meeting, we did really truly hold your feet to the fire, and your professionalism and honesty and spirit of cooperation is what got us to this. So I really appreciate it. And it wasn't easy. We certainly look at the budget from different perspectives, and I really truly hope that we've met a balance here and haven't cut it by too much. Thank you.
Ms. Hannadel.
Thank you, everybody.
I also want to thank the Budget Committee, Mr. Brennan and Dr. Stevenson, and I am honestly relieved that I was not sitting on the Budget Committee, because Stephen, you picked it up much quicker than I did. I would go home and my head would spin. So greatly, greatly appreciate the work that you did. For everybody, I don't know if this is going to go on the agenda, Nabel, because we just keep seeming to filling it up. We postponed a look at our board goals. I had asked for input as to what you feel we accomplished, what we had done, looking at our action plans. I've only heard back from one person. So if between now and our work session, any input that you have regarding our action plans, I would appreciate it. And that is it. Thank you, 3 people, for coming. I would like at this point, Jeff, just out of curiosity, do you have anything more for negotiations? Or we're pretty good there.
Just we postponed our meeting from the 19th.
Okay.
We talked about having it in May. I haven't informed anyone yet until we get a date and
Okay.
a time frame for receiving the claims history.
Okay, all right, awesome. Then I am going to ask for a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of the superintendent search, and would ask that those conflicted will leave, and I will have Mrs. Chambers take some notes. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Second?
Second.